A war that was supposed to be about Iran just handed Russia its best month of oil sales to India ever. Kpler data points to India's Russian crude imports reaching roughly 2.35 million barrels a day in June, a potential all-time high. Figures through June 19 were running even higher than that. But that record run may be about to hit a wall. Two things are closing in on it at once: Ukraine's drone campaign tearing into Russia's refineries, and Washington pulling back the very waiver that made this record possible in the first place. This is the story of how one crisis fixed India's energy strategy around Russian crude, and how two different forces could now put that strategy at risk. When the US-Iran conflict put shipping through the Strait of Hormuz in doubt, buyers everywhere went looking for crude that did not have to pass through the Persian Gulf. That search handed Russia an opening. Despite the sanctions still in place over the Ukraine war, Russian crude suddenly looked like the safe option available, competitively priced and sitting outside the danger zone. Washington issued a temporary sanctions waiver for Russian oil purchases, an attempt to keep a global energy shock from spiraling further as prices spiked and Gulf supply warped. The result: Moscow standing in Asian markets. India, above all, got stronger almost overnight. India had the most to lose. Close to half of its crude imports carry some link to the Strait of Hormuz, which made any disruption there a direct hit to its energy security. So Indian refiners diversified. Fast purchases from Russia climbed, while refiners also reached for crude from the Atlantic Basin and South America, including Venezuela. Trade analytics firm Kpler points to March 2026 as a turning point, when India's buying pattern shifted decisively towards supply security over routes it could no longer fully trust. Russian crude became the backbone of that new strategy, not just because it was cheap, but because it kept showing up on schedule. The Strait of Hormuz is still the world's single most important energy choke point, and for a while restrictions from both Tehran and Washington choked traffic through it almost completely. There are now signs of recovery. After an interim peace agreement between US and Iran, ships have begun moving back through the corridor and oil shipments are slowly resuming. Analysts expect a backlog of stranded crude to flow back into global markets if the calm holds. That if matters. Markets are treating the reopening as fragile, not final, and so is India. Here's the turning point Indian refiners now have to plan around. The US sanctions exception that helped normalize Russian oil flows has lapsed. That waiver was always framed as an emergency fix, not a long-term policy. It was first granted as a short-term measure to let stranded Russian cargo keep moving while Hormuz was effectively shut, and was explicitly pitched by Washington as carrying little real financial benefit to Moscow, since it only covered oil already at sea. While Hormuz reopening and the US-Iran ceasefire holding, Washington's reasoning is that the emergency justification no longer applies, so the carve-out goes away. For India, that's a meaningfully different position than the one it was buying from a few weeks ago. Without the waiver, every fresh Russian cargo purchase carries renewed exposure to US sanctions risk. Add to that the political pressure that came with it, pressure that was already loud in Washington, where lawmakers had slammed the original waiver to adversary Russia. That does not mean Indian refiners stop buying Russian crude overnight. The economics and reliability that made it attractive haven't disappeared. But it does not mean the volume India has been comfortable importing at record levels may not be sustainable once the legal cover is gone. The supply India has been leaning on harder than ever is also under direct attack from a different direction. Ukraine has sharply escalated drone strikes on Russian refineries through 2026. In mid-June, long-range drones hit major refining and petrochemical sites in Tatarstan and the Samara region. Days later, a large-scale strike set fire to a major refinery on Moscow's outskirts, just miles from the Kremlin, one of the most significant attacks on the Russian capital since the war began. Russian oil officials have started admitting what they avoided saying for months. Refinery output has been cut, and the cause is enemy strikes, not routine maintenance. None of this stops Russian crude exports outright. Strikes have mostly hit downstream refinery capacity, not the wells themselves. But repeated damage to refining infrastructure raises real questions about Russia's ability to keep processing and shipping fuel at the same pace. But the threads together and the picture looks like this. India built a new energy strategy around Russian oil because the Middle East suddenly felt unsafe. That strategy hit a record in June, but now three pressures are converging on it at once. A reopening Strait of Hormuz reducing the urgency of Russian crude, a US sanctions waiver that's gone, and a Ukrainian drone campaign battering the refineries on the other end of the supply chain. India's energy map has already changed this year. Whether it holds at record levels or quietly pulls back may depend less on the Gulf and more on what happens in Washington and at Russia's refineries this summer.
If they had a nuclear weapon,
The old rules are breaking. Alliances are shifting.
Apologize again to the victims of the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein.
Wars are redrawing maps. Oil routes can shake economies overnight. One election in America can impact markets in Mumbai.
no tax on tips.
One move by China can alter the balance in Asia. One conflict in West Asia can hit every Indian household. This is no longer a distant story. This is our story. Your story. Because for the first time in decades, India is not watching from the sidelines. India is rising. India is negotiating. India is balancing rivals. India is building military strength. India is shaping trade routes. India is becoming central to the new global order. And yet, most global news is still told through someone else's lens. Washington's lens, Beijing's lens, London's lens. But where is India's lens? Where is the platform that explains the world from our perspective? Welcome to India's Axis, a new destination for geopolitics, strategy and power seen through India's eyes, from Neighborhood Watch to the biggest global stories that matter to you. Why tensions in the Taiwan Strait matter to India, how one move by China can affect India's security, what turmoil in Pakistan means for regional stability, how Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Bhutan shape India's neighborhood, why oil choke points can hit your wallet, how wars abroad can reshape India's security. This is not noise. This is not shouting. This is not recycled headlines. This is sharp, intelligent storytelling, daily explainers, war room analysis, strategic conversations, because news is everywhere, but perspective is rare, and in the age of confusion, clarity is power. Axis is for the audience that wants more than headlines. The axis of global power is shifting. India is at the center of that shift. It's time the world was explained accordingly, to understand the world through India's strategic lens. Subscribe now.